That's a great question. As a matter of fact, that's the third law of wealth. Believe in yourself when no one else will. We all have faith, but very few of us choose to exercise it. You know, probably the best example of that is Martin Luther King, Dr. King, when he said faith is taking the first step without even seeing the staircase.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's just a question, are you going to exercise your faith? And we all know about that maxim, you know, doubt and fear knocked on the door and faith answered. Okay? And the question that, or, you know, the metaphor that I like to use of faith is, you know, two roads diverge in the wood. I took the one less traveled by. You know, you are different, you are unique. Probably, you know, if I ask you to define success, you know, what would you tell me success is? No, if I ask you the opposite of success, what would be your answer?
Failure.
Yeah. Well, the opposite of success is not failure. The opposite of success is conformity. You'll never succeed conforming to the wishes, norms, and mores of others. Well, why do people conform? Well, that's a safety zone. Arguably, the worst place in the world you could ever be in your life is in your comfort zone. Is in your comfort zone. So we live in a world that rewards faith, that rewards being different and unique, that rewards differentiation. I mean, you take the word capitalism and write it on a piece of paper, capitalism. You take the Latin derivative of the word capitalism, caput, kaput. Well, what does kaput mean in Latin? It means head. Well, what's the one thing you must use in order to survive in a free and open society? You must use your head. So what in the world does that have to do with faith? The average individual in our society gets 4 ideas a year, Brandy. 4 a year.
4 ideas a year, Dad?
If they had the guts, the courage, the fortitude to chase their dream, would make them financially independent.
Wow.
Why don't they do that? The lack of faith. I was asked one time to list my 5 best business books. And one of them was Lewis Carroll's book, Alice in the Looking Glass. And I got a little pushback because I said, man, that's a children's book. That's like a bedtime story you read to your kids, almost like a nursery rhyme. I said, there's nothing childish about Alice in the Looking Glass. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, go ahead and read it. When Lewis Carroll wrote that book in 1869, he didn't write it as a children's book because he asked Alice 3 critical questions that all entrepreneurs and all would-be game changers and peak performers must answer at some point in their life. So there's Alice, and we know the looking glass is a mirror. Alice is walking and sees the looking glass and sees her image, and Lewis Carroll says, Alice, what do you see? And Alice is looking at it and blah, blah, blah. Then he asks Alice a second question. He says, Alice, do you see what you want to see, or do you see what the world wants you to see?
Yeah.
And then he asks Alice the third question. He says, Alice, are you willing to take the final step to create what you see so the whole world can see it? Now, what does that have to do today? Well, Lewis Carroll is describing Alice in the Looking Glass. But when I read that, I'm thinking of Jay-Z. Because when Jay-Z lived in the Marcy housing projects in New York, that little apartment that mother and father and everybody was living in, there was only like 2 or 3 windows in there, and one of the windows was in the kitchen, over a faucet, over a sink. And his mother would constantly say, why do you keep looking out that at the gangbangers and crackheads and those who just physical assaulted and all blah, blah. And Jay-Z, what did he say to his mother? I'm not looking at gangbangers and drug abusers. Mom, that's my future I'm looking at. Because he was willing to take the final step. You ain't got faith, you have nothing.
Yeah.
You have nothing. You have nothing. We're here to magnify the Lord.
Yeah.
And that's all the Bible is. The Bible, especially the New Testament, is nothing but a series of case studies of folks that have overcome obstacles, overcome challenges,
Yeah.
and after they did so, well, they magnify the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sooner or later, when are you going to magnify the Lord? When? Henry David Thoreau said, "Don't die with your music left in you." Well, who in the world was Henry David Thoreau, Dr. Kimbro? Well, he was Ralph Waldo Emerson's prized pupil. Okay? And as we know about Henry David Thoreau, he was incarcerated later on in his life because he refused to pay his income taxes because he didn't like the way that Native Americans were being treated, and he didn't like the way African Americans were being treated. He said, "I'm not paying taxes for this." So they threw him in jail. His teacher, Ralph Waldo Emerson, goes down to the jail to talk to his prized pupil. And he says to Ralph Waldo Emerson, he says, "Henry, what in the world are you doing in there?" And Henry David Thoreau looks out behind the prison's bars and says, "Dr. Emerson, what are you doing out there?" Come on, bro, you taught me. You should be in here with me. So we need faith. We need a strong faith. We need an enduring faith. We need faith that, man, at this particular juncture, and I can give you all the data, 44 million African Americans, 40% are non-banked or unbanked. Only 1 out of 3, actually less than 1 out of 3, any types of savings, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Come on, man, we got to ramp it up. We got to change the paradigm.
Yeah.
We've got to change the paradigm. And what you're doing is critical, taking these stories forward, because you never know. You never know. You're speaking to a different audience today, and we need these visual images. We need them desperately.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the things, and I was just, when we were in India last week, I was having this conversation at dinner, and Jada, my producer, and I, we got asked the question, well, do you think that, you telling stories of Black people basically is that, do you feel like that's like a disservice, that you should be discussing all stories? And I thought about it for a minute, and I was like, well, we do discuss all stories, but I think it's imperative for us to talk about our stories, because if we don't, they will write us out of history and say we weren't here. They will say we didn't exist. They will twist the narrative and make it something that wasn't true. And so I know that it's important for us to talk about our own wealth choices, our stories of success, our stories of triumph. It's important.